Hi, everyone. My name is Randy and I am a lawyer practicing in Toronto, Canada. I have with me today my research assistant, Sandy, who is currently in law school. And the purpose of this video is to explore what law school looks like in 2024. So, Sandy, do you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself?
For sure. So my name is Sandy. I'm currently a first year law student at the University of Ottawa. And yeah, just learning through the hoops and hopefully one day I wish to be in your shoes.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. So, why did you want to go into law school?
So originally I wanted to go to law school because of it's always been my dream since I was in grade 9. And going through I took some I was part of mock trials, and I took some law courses in high school, and I was really interested. And when I came to undergrad at the University of Toronto, I really liked the work I was doing in labor and employment law. So I was a research assistant. And the main reason I think was because I have a learning disability myself, and I wanted to advocate for people who have disabilities like myself, and it led me here.
Okay, fantastic. What was the application process like to get into law school?
Yeah, the application process was very I would say it was very daunting.
Uh,
So you had to gather your references beforehand. You all you have to do is basically apply through the OK OLASIS, so the Ontario Law Students Application portal. So and then you select the different law schools you want, and each law school has their own statement that you have to submit. But more importantly, it's characters that you have to write, not words. And then there's also optional essays that you can submit as well. With your whether for you Ottawa, for example, I remember that you have to write an essay about systematic barriers, as well as wider law school on top of that, and your references, and of course your work experience also has to be included.
was there one part that you found to be the most challenging?
I think the personal statements were the most challenging, where you have to actually sit down and think about, oh, why did I go to law school, but actually make it a story. And I've talked to a lot of people, and I was always told, oh, don't talk about your grades and stuff, which I didn't. But one thing that I was really stressed about was that when I was an undergrad, I didn't take 5 courses a semester, which some schools like Western Law considered to be not full time. And so I put a small paragraph at the end of why I did that. But other than that, I think the process of actually drafting your notes to write the personal statement was the hardest for me.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, do you remember what your personal statement was when you wrote it at the time?
Yeah, I briefly, it was for some schools it was different than others, but my U Ottawa one was recyclable. I talked about my learning disability, as well as I remember I talked about how the experience I did in my undergrad really opened the eyes, like it opened me to the world. And for example, I remember I wrote specifically about the advice I got from when I was a kid from my grandma, who was actually she was a PhD herself, and how if you have a goal in mind, you should always accomplish it. And even though my story was more that when I first immigrated to Canada, I was constantly pulled out of schools, and I was given workload that's essentially easier than everyone else, because they considered me someone who's not as smart as other people, I guess. And I was actually told by a psychologist that I should not be going to university. So I talked about that, and how my time at University of Toronto actually made me see myself in a competitive field like law. And I just think that story got to some admissions, because I did end up getting 4 acceptances at the end. And it's all about I feel being personal. It's not about you know it's the experiences that get you to where you want to be.
For sure. Congratulations that you got four acceptances. That's a big accomplishment.
Thank you. I mean, I wanted all good, but I didn't get it. It's fine.
Well, you're at a good school right now, so
Yeah, I'm really happy with you. Ottawa was a very good environment.
What advice would you give to potentially, students, undergrad students watching this video right now about the law school application process?
I think it's always better to like start early. Like that's one thing that I feel like I struggled with. Like I took a year off, and like one of the reasons was because of the LSAT. I didn't have the best mark, but starting early and even asking for your references early is one thing that I struggled with, because a lot of my professors that I wanted to write me references were not able to, just because they had a lot of commitments. That's one thing. Another thing I would say is talk to the undergrad associations, because usually they have a lot of contacts, which I didn't realize until like now that I'm in law school. They're always posting on their Instagram, oh, like come here, we have like this panel of like law students or lawyers. They usually can connect you with someone.
Okay. Did you find it difficult getting references?
um at the beginning, yes. I feel like a lot of my relationships with my professors were not very like personal as I wanted them to be. I feel like my relationships with my profs in law school is like, I would say, more intimate, in a sense that they know me better than my undergrad profs. But I feel like even if you didn't know, just having a good mark in that class also allows a lot of professors to talk about like, like they usually have access to your assignments. Like a lot of the prompts I asked stuff for was for qualitative research classes, and they usually would talk about the transferable skills, for example. Um, yeah, I think the references is a hard part, but if you can draft a good email, you
Yeah,
can sure
for
get your
sure.
references.
You have to persuade the professors, right, to write something good for you.
Um,
I know some professors just let you write it yourself, and then they say, fill in your name, and I'll
Yeah,
send.
one of the profs, actually, the first cycle I applied for law school, she made me do that. She made me write it from her perspective. And I think that was really cool, because no, I've never thought about references that way, but she knew me enough to like accept to write a reference letter, but like I don't think she knew me that well. So she just submitted it on her. But one thing I want to say is that you don't actually access your references, they just submit it. So for example, like on like the OLASs, you would put their email, and like the actual portal sends the information to the professor, but you don't actually see the reference letter that they wrote. So
What type of marks do you need nowadays to get into law school?
I think like honestly, like I know a lot of people from Ottawa that don't have the best grades and they got in, but like I think one thing that they combat with is they're mature students and they have 15 years of experience. But I think nowadays you at least need a 3.5 or above. Like my GPA was 3.89 on a 4.0 scale. And I think it's good to at least be on the median for your GPA. If your LSAT is not as good, then your GPA will kind of like help you balance it out. But if it's vice versa, like if your LSAT is better than your GPA, it depends on the school. There is a website, actually, I don't know if you heard of it, but it's called Canadian Law Student Forum. A lot of people there actually post like the grades that they, like for example, the stats that they got in and if they got accepted or not. And there's also a rejections tab for each school, and like their stats there too, and extracurriculars are involved in.
Okay. And you mentioned LSATs. What's the minimum cutoff for LSAT scores? I know it may differ from school to school, but in general, what do you need to hit at least?
I think from what I've heard, it's like you at least need a 152. Like or like you have to be in like the 150s. Obviously, like a 120 is a fail. It's not considered good. But I think if you want to be competitive, it's always good to be in the 160s from what I've heard. And if you're aiming for a school like U of T, they want like a 168. Osgood a 165, I think. Windsor and Ottawa take a more of holistic approach, I would say. Those are the schools that I got accepted into. And Ryerson is a new school. I got waitlisted there. But they have an actual interview portion for their law school. So that's probably why they see if you were a fit in their faculty or not.
Okay. So let's talk about the law school experience.
Yeah.
Overall, what's first year like?
I think first year is really challenging in a sense, like the time management, like at U Ottawa, you take 7 courses in your first year. I think it differs for every law school, but that's how the curriculum at my school works. And it's just that like the actual like reading of a case and breaking it down that can be very challenging at the beginning. And the 100% exams, it makes you very shocked. Because in undergrad, I think the highest maximum exam I had was 35%. It was a lot of assignments. If to be honest, I like more assignment-based courses. But yeah, like I think what makes Ottawa like a really good place is like there is a lot of mentorship, which I really like. For example, there's two different mentorship programs. You select a small group, which so I pick torts. You can do crim or constitutional law as well. And then you have more of like a mentorship with your professor in first year, and they usually help you be like, oh, this is how law school's graded. This is how you do a case brief. And so you learn that in the first 2 weeks. And so far, so good, I guess.
Keep up the good work. If you could explain for our audience the difference between law school classes and undergrad classes, because I went through law school too, and I found there was a significant difference in terms
Yeah.
of how they're structured, what you're learning. If you could explain to our audience what the difference is and what does it look like.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say undergraduate classes, from my memory, was more like the professor standing up there and lecturing. So like there would be like a topic for the day. Of course, the similarities is like that the syllabuses are posted beforehand, your materials given beforehand. But like undergrad content, I would say is more like easier to grasp. While law school content is like you actually have to prepare in class, like not necessarily have to prepare in class for undergrad because a lot of professors also like at my school, like my contracts prof likes to cold call on people. And if you, it's just, I don't like not being prepared because it makes you feel like you're not like, I don't sound good in front of my colleagues, I guess, but like also like it's a lot of thinking on your feet, right? Like a lot of my exams in law school are more about like fact pattern, and that's a different style of examination versus in undergrad with a lot of multiple choice and policy questions, like essay questions that you can easily like have like the material memorized. Like law school exams are also closed, like open book, versus undergrad is more closed book. But I think I real at the beginning I was like, oh, their exams must be easy for open book. But like it's like you have to like to learn to apply the law in the scenario, right? And I think that's like knowing where like understanding your notes rather than memorizing is a very important skill, which I struggled with, but like, like I got like like a semester or so down for law school. So like I kind of like know how to navigate it now.
Yeah, for sure. For people watching who don't know what an open book exam is, can you explain to our audience what that looks like?
Yeah, so first of all, we do our exams on a exam software. So you can't access the internet and all such, but you can bring your notes um on your computer or you can print them out and bring them to class. Also, that also could include the textbook, but if some professors don't want you to bring the textbook, they will say for you not to bring it. So you can bring your notes, your textbook, or also any like that and your device. All law school exams are computerized for the most part. Like unless you don't have a computer, then you will be writing it by hand and closed book. There are some closed book exams. My criminal law closed book actually, and that means like no material and shut down on your whole computer and just the software.
For sure. So what are the mandatory courses in first year that you have to take?
Yeah, so torts, legal foundations, which is like legal research and writing. There is also property law. There is public and constitutional law, contract law. Ottawa has a first year elective, so you have a choice to take whatever you want for that. And then as well as there is dispute resolution and professionalism, which is you learn the difference between like arbitration, litigation, and such. And yeah, those are all the classes.
Do you have a favorite class?
Yeah, I would say my favorite class is actually contract law, just because of the way that like the class is actually structured. Like my professor like he was an intervener in the Supreme Court Uber v. Heller case, and he always talks about like the controversies that he doesn't like about contract law and what he would change. and just thinking more on your feet. And he takes a more practical approach to learning rather than other professors. I would say like it feels like sometimes like a lot of word vomit that you had to do. Yeah.
And who is your favorite professor so far? Or it doesn't have to be your favorite, maybe top three favorite professors.
Yeah. I would say I really liked my small group professor for torts. She was very like she was on the 1L coordinator, so she was very like big on like mentorship and stuff. I really like that. And my elective, I took in happiness and the law, and that was a very interesting course because the professor didn't really care about grades, and I feel like she just wanted like students to learn about like what habits can you take like as a law student and as a future working professional to actually maintain your mental health in your career. And the research was very interesting to learn about, and yeah, I really liked her teaching style for that.
That's fascinating. I did not take that particular course. I remember uh, when I went to Osgood, and this would have been 2006, was when I started, around 2006, 2007, when I was a first year law student. We did constitutional law, we did criminal. I think there was legal research and writing. That was a required course.
Yeah.
Uh, Torts, contracts. I I'm going from memory here, but I think property was one of the required courses. But there were a group of required courses. But this course that you took about what was it? Is it happiness and the law? Oh,
Yeah, so it's actually very like um I realized like not a lot of like law schools do that because I talked to my friends in other law schools like Osgood and they were very shocked there was such a class.
yeah.
uh, um, the professor Linda Collins, she actually does research in the field, and she made us read like a bunch of research when it came to the class. And you during the class itself, we actually learned how to properly meditate and the different styles of meditation.
Wow.
And it was very like it makes you like very calm and collected. And like I just wish like they would actually make a class like that mandatory at the first semester of law school when you're actually going through the stressors. But like there's actually like in your 3L you can take a mindfulness class as well, which I think is very cool. Like on the same topic, but more about like being more mindful and like taking care of yourself as well.
That sounds very progressive. Progressive. That sounds very progressive. We certainly did not have courses like that when I went to law school. They just did not exist. So I think you're very lucky in that you have courses like that. What courses are you aiming for next year?
Like what courses I want to take?
Yeah, what courses or classes do you want to take next year?
Well, of course, there's still like some mandatory courses that I need to take next year, such as University of Ottawa has constitutional law number 2, which I have to take, and then also there is administrative law. There's business organizations. You have to take 1 credit of oral advocacy credit, which I want to do in dispute resolution and professionalism in the second part because I really liked how that course actually it gives you more practical like experience. Like we wrote like an actual memo, we wrote a client letter advising a client over like a fake scenario, as well as like how to interview a client and stuff, which I think is very interesting. And you have to take a course also like where majority of your mark comes from writing a paper. So I want to do that in employment law. Like my friend did that this year for employment law. I want to take the 2 labor classes that my school offers, as well as insurance law is also something I want to take.
Tell me a bit more about marking. How does marking take place? Are there bell curves? Is it like, you just get 1 mark at the end based on one assignment? Tell me about the marking process.
Yeah, so you're marked on a curve. So the curve for Ottawa, and I think most of law school is around a B. So for example, like the way that it's split at my school is like you have 50% exam in December and you have 50% exam in April. I know other law schools, it's like you take a few classes in the fall, then you get your final mark in December, and then a few classes in the winter and you get your final grade in April. But for U Ottawa, it's full year classes. Most of the 7 classes are full year. And so the curve, like for example, like my criminal law class, like the curve was the mark was below the curve, like it was around 60. So that means he has to like curve up, which means like most students will go up. If your grade is already high, it most likely won't go up than it already is. And my happiness on the law class was curved down because the grades were too high. So they really want to maintain like that B average. So if your grades are like around like a B plus or an A, then I think they have to meet like that like C threshold as well, you know? Yeah.
So for those who are watching the video today who may be an undergrad and who have never experienced a curve, can you explain to our audience what a curve is and how it works?
Yeah, so it's like a normal distribution, right? So like you have like a few like I would say like 70-80% of people, like 70-60-70% will fall within the B range, so B plus. And then you have like maybe like the outliers that have like a few A's, A minus to an A plus. So like that would usually be like 10 or so people maybe in the class. And then you also have people that like have between C's and D's. And that would be like the other remaining half. Like, but most people would fall within the BB plus range, and it would like fall down within like normal distribution, I guess, like that.
So tell me about the law school environment. What's it like just being in law school?
Yeah, so one of the reasons I decided to go to U Ottawa just because there's a lot of mentorship, like I said. The law school environment can be sometimes like competitive. Obviously, like you're in a room full of with a lot of smart people, right? Like these people like had like good experience, like they all come with unique experiences, they all came with good grades. So you always have like that one, like those few people that are always participating in class and you feel kind of intimidated. But like other than that, I feel like when you find your like the right group for yourself, you can actually enjoy law school. Like it's important to actually like not study all the time. I feel like and I learned that like when I was always so stressed about like, for example, oh, like I'm really behind on my readings, and you start to feel really guilty at some point of the semester. But like I think at the end of the day, like no one can really fail law school. Like it's like, there's a curve for a reason, and like the counselor is always gonna emphasize like you to pass. So um I think that's what I like about it, is that it's like you're guaranteed something, I feel like. So
For sure. Now, this is a big topic that I remember when I went to law school was this debate between whether it was better to study on your own or to study with a group of people. What's your opinion on this timeless debate?
it's so funny because I was just talking to my friends about it the other day. So I personally like to study on my own, and that's because of the way that I've always learned in undergrad. When I'm studying with a group of people, I just feel like I'm underprepared, and it stresses me out and it causes me like some sort of an anxiety. But like I have some friends that actually like to study with other people. So like for example, the small groups that we have, we like book study rooms or like actually go through over our notes after class and be like, okay, what did we miss? What did you get that I didn't get, for example? Which it can be helpful in that way, but like for me personally, I like to have my bases covered and actually my material learned before I go join my like peers. That way I can actually contribute and see like, am I learning something from them, or is it that I'm learning everything because I didn't actually start studying yet? So
For sure. Are you using summaries?
yeah, that's the I don't really write my own summaries, which is really funny. I have a lot of lecture notes for sure, but a lot of like part of like the mentorship program is like when you're paired with a mentor, they give you their summaries as well. And it's not necessarily like they have like, for example, different professors, but the content is more so the same across the board, right? It's like, but it sometimes depends because the professor likes to take a different approach of studying. But like if it's the same textbook, like for example, like I'm not sure if every law school has this, like maybe you can speak on Osgood, but for U Ottawa, the the law student government, they actually have a database full of summaries for a lot of courses, especially for first year. So you can download those summaries for different professors and then you can reuse them if you wanted to. It's just one thing that they would say is like, you don't know the grade of that person. That person could have gotten like a grade that's not good, but like, it's like you should also like create like, you should be able to understand their notes as they're your own, you know.
For
So
sure. And so for perhaps the undergrad students watching today, do you want to explain what a summary is?
yeah, for sure. So for example, so a summary is basically a condensed notes for the whole class for your final exam, whether it is in December or April. So for example, like for my torts class, the first exam was on negligence, and you would have your summary would be full of all of the cases that you went through throughout the whole class, as well as like different terminology, like what are the elements, for example, for negligence. And then the whole summary would include all of that information, and then you would bring it to the exam. That's an open book exam, and you can use your summary during the exam to actually construct your answers.
Okay, good. That's a great summary of what a summary is.
Yeah.
Unintended pun there. Now, tell me about the amount of reading that you have to do, because I know a lot of our audience may be interested to know, like, how much homework do I have to do? How much reading? Maybe you can explain that to our audience.
For sure. So when you're taking like 7 classes, each class would have a number of sets of readings a week. So for example, contract law, I would say would be my least class of readings a week. It would be around like 15, 20 pages a week versus like constitutional law would be around 80 pages versus like criminal law would be around another 50 pages. Legal foundations, usually there's nothing because it's more like how you use the legal databases. But like for torts, it would be another like 30 to 50 pages that week. And then you would go, my thematic that I took, like happiness and the law, it was like undergrad material, it wasn't really that dense. Like 15, 20 pages, like it's not too bad. And then property law would be like another like good 50 pages. So like it's like if you do all the math together, it would come up like to around like, you know, like 200, 300 pages a week. But like it's really about time management. And like you don't necessarily have to do all of the readings. It's just getting the key idea of like each case and writing it down. And then you have like tools online like case fandom and stuff to actually give you like the ratio that's what you're looking for after you read the actual case on your book.
For sure. So typically, what are the readings? Specifically, what are you reading?
Yeah, most of my readings are case law because a lot of my books are case books and commentary. So it's not like undergrad where you're reading like a textbook. It's more like you have this torts book and contract book, and it would just be like a book full of cases. There is no like content on like, oh, what are the elements of a contract and stuff. That's usually something that professor will teach you and lecture you on in class, but the actual book won't have that. But like for example, my criminal law book, I would say is more of a textbook. It's like still a case book, but um there's a lot of content in that book that I would compare it to undergrad because they would actually define the concepts for you versus like my constitutional law class would be like all cases as well. So that's usually the rule in law school, it seems like. I don't know if it changes in your like
It
higher.
hasn't changed at all.
Okay.
Some professors, very few, use textbooks, or textbooks complemented by customized material. So
Yeah.
a booklet of photocopied cases
Yeah.
that become required reading for the week. Uh,
Yeah.
Again, very different from undergrad, because in undergrad we're used to reading textbooks, but these are not textbooks at all. These are cases. You're reading case after case. They tend to blur into each other after a
Yeah.
while.
And like it's like actually thick book, like it's like pages and pages of it. But like nowadays they do make it really accessible to go through online. I still prefer my books like in person because it makes me like I actually like to highlight on it rather than read on my screen. But for criminal law, you would also have the criminal code. So sometimes they have like books of the actual legislation that you're supposed to know for some classes. So
What are some of the technological tools available to you right now as of 2024 in terms of doing your work and researching and your readings?
Yeah, for sure. Like, like ChatGPT is a big thing these days, like artificial intelligence. A lot of like my friends have it where they like if like a lot of the books are online, so you can take like the reading and insert in ChatGPT and it can give you like a summary if that's what you want. There's also like I know in LexisNexis you can also like get a summary of a few things like an outline. And then just in general, like having like summaries online is also completely different, right? Than like maybe they had like a long time ago where like summaries were not so accessible, but now every other student, if they're willing, they will give you a summary. Um, as well as like just these tools, like if you want to take note taking, be faster and stuff, you can when the prof is talking, you can put like detect on Word and they can type for you. Because sometimes what I find compared to like undergrad is that the professors talk so much faster. I don't know why, but like it just feels like that way to me. And it's just that, you know, you don't really get a break in law school classes. It's just like it's usually like 1 hour and a half or 2 hours, like straight through, and like they don't really give you a break. And you just like it's like most of the time they teach you in a Socratic method, so it's a lot of discussion.
For sure. I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying about technology. We certainly did not have um, a fraction of the technology that you have access to now. So ChatGPT back in my day in 2006, 2007, when I started, didn't exist at all. ChatGPT is artificial intelligence is a new thing. So that didn't exist. Summaries we had to negotiate individually with upper students. It was, we would essentially have to network and find upper year students that liked us in order to, beg for summaries from certain students. And some students were certainly more generous than others who would
Yeah, of course.
not be very interested in sharing their summaries because they were more competitive or they just were
I
not
feel
in
I
that.
feel like everyone in like these days they're just willing to hand you a summary, like not having if you don't like the summaries that are and there's your professor's not on the summary database, there's usually like there's Facebook group chats now, right? So like class of 2023, class of 2024, anyone can join them. And then you just like you search up some people, be like, hey, looking for summaries, and people will just send it to you. Just like having that technology there is also very accessible. And different group chats, like in WhatsApp, we have a class, a whole group chat of like 200, 300 people for class of 2026 versus class of 2025. And people just write questions there and like they ask questions and people are always like willing to help. So
It sounds so futuristic relative to what I went through, which was so different. And it's fascinating you mentioned that software now can record and type the notes for you. Uh,
yeah,
we had to do it old school, right? So we sat there and typed our notes by hand. And some people even with pen and paper, they did it, the classic style, just writing down the notes by longhand, pen and paper. But most
yeah,
of when I went to law school had laptops, but certainly not the software available to transcribe audio into notes that were intelligible. There was some audio technology at the time, but it was not very good, so you would miss things. But now I would imagine that the technology has
and it's
advanced.
good. Yeah, just because the professors they speak so fast, and just in general, like if you also have like accommodations and stuff, like you're allowed to record class. Obviously, you need to get that and ask for the professor's permission. But like usually the counselor, like the academic advisor, like they're usually very understanding and they don't really reject your requests.
Okay. Tell me more about the social environment in law school, the clubs, the activities. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so for when you start law school, there's usually like at least at my school there was a first year mooting competition. So basically what a moot is you stand in front of like a panel of judges or like experts in the field and you present your oral argument. So like I was part of that first year experience. And then you go all the way to the finalists if you have like good argument and you would win like a cash prize or like whatever. There's also a lot of like law clubs. So like when you first like come into law school, there is a club fair for the law students and it would usually be at the faculty. I joined the Technology and Law Society, and I also joined the International Law and Commercial Trade Club. But there's like a lot of things you can think of. Like there's like still like a lot of the ethnic clubs, like the South Asian, Asian, Middle Eastern clubs you can, and usually each of these clubs, they like as the year progresses, they bring panels in the field that are more like you. Like if you're like Middle Eastern, they would bring Middle Eastern people that are working maybe in big law or like working in government, etc. So there's also a lot of like um social events in general, like the VP social, like there is like law ball, which is usually very huge. There is also, you know, bar nights. There is also sporting events that like my school has civil law as well. So civil versus common law, like sporting event, like you would attend like the arena and you would see like I guess sprout for someone. But
Uh,
yeah.
Now, Ottawa is unique in that you have civil law and common law. Do you want to explain to our audience how that works at your school?
For sure. So common, like first of all, there's two common law programs. There's English and French. So I'm part of the English. But if you're French speaking, you can for sure apply for the common law. The civil law portion is like, you know, like Quebec is civil law, right? So usually people who want to practice in Quebec can do that. But also what's very unique is that you can do your civil law program in 3 years, but you also have an option if you're doing civil law. You can do 1 year of common law, so you can also get your common law, I guess, certificate as well if you want to practice in jurisdictions like Ontario. But also the civil law program, like actually some of the law programs, a lot of people are doing their undergrad with their law program, if that makes sense. And I didn't know of that like before like I went to law school, but like some people are finishing up their political science major, for example, and then they're switching into their JD. So yeah.
Now, in terms of the demographics, how many students are, for example, coming directly from undergrad, and how many are
Okay.
mature students, perhaps coming in from the workplace? What does the split look like?
Yeah, I'm not sure of like the specific numbers, but like based on my experience, a lot of people are ranging when getting into law school. I think the median age is around 26, 27. Um, but there's also a lot of mature students. Like for example, like the class of 2026, I met a few mature students that were paralegals before, and then they decided to go back to I guess like explore law further, and they went to law school. But I would say most people took like 1 or 2 years off, then went into law school. But then there's always people that come like right after as well, obviously.
Yeah,
Which yeah,
for sure. And I
I
know certain
so
people do, for example, law school and MBA at the same time, or law school and another program simultaneously. So there are people who do that. And I personally know some paralegals who've gone back to law school, or people in the industry who've gone back
yeah.
to law school. When I went to law school, there was this fascinating person I met who had already accomplished, and he had a medical degree. So he was as a psychiatrist, like a practicing psychiatrist. He had already
Yeah.
accomplished a medical degree. Was in the middle of completing his law degree. He did it over 6 years because he was also practicing as a psychiatrist,
Wow.
and was simultaneously, and this is just the craziest thing, he was also simultaneously trying to get his pilot's license. Imagine the person with a
It's
medical
accomplished.
pilot's license. I mean, you must really love the school
Learning.
environment. Yeah. Or you must really love to collect your what do you call those? Things at the end of your name after your signature, MD or JD, or I don't know what you call them, but you must really like
I,
to collect the
I
credentials.
met a few people that had PhD as well. Their experience, like obviously they're very good writers and like they seem very accomplished, but like I think one thing they told me is that when I asked them, oh, why did you decide to go to law school? It's like you can't really get jobs in academia. They said, which is very unfortunate because it's like a lot of schooling as well. But yeah, like you really get to see like the different experiences you come from, and that's what makes it such a unique experience compared to undergrad where a lot of people are coming from high school, right?
Yeah. So going back to technology, which I think is a really fascinating topic, especially in this time and age when technology is moving so quickly. And this is just a question for you to use your imagination. There's no right or wrong answer. But where do you see the future of legal education as technology is progressing at such a fast pace?
I just like legal education in general or the legal field.
Um, we'll talk about legal education, then we'll talk about the legal field. But the legal education, in terms of how students are being educated, because already in our discussion today, it seems that there's some, not significant, but there's some very important differences between what the experience I went through and the experience that you're going through right now.
Yeah, I would like, for example, like even the ChatGPT stuff right now is like helping a lot of students. I see like legal education in the future being like, of course, professors have very important roles, and I think their experience is what matters the most. But like, I see like even like these days, like a lot of people, a lot of my professors, they just post like lectures online, or like they give you videos that are very important or informative that are related to the topic, right? And then even like, I just see like one of the reasons like they have like an exam software is because of AI, right? So like I don't know if they're going to be more strict within the exams. Maybe they'll like even remove exams in the future, because like AI, I feel like is very like significant tool to like help you like come up with the answers, etc. Right? Um, yeah, I just see it helping students learn better, like especially when it comes to like actually breaking down these cases.
Yeah, for sure. Do you see any drawbacks or potential negative side effects of this dependence on technology?
Yeah, I can see like a bit of drawbacks, just because like even like seeing people in my class, like even when we're in their lecture, they're on ChatGPT, and like they're using ChatGPT for things such as like formulating emails and stuff, and that's fine. But like I sometimes feel like it's the lack of using your mind in itself, because it's all about like, actually like building the skill of analytical thinking, right? And maybe that's a drawback, in which like you're not actually spending time to understand the case, but you're just putting it through a software. And like like if it's like a time crunch, I understand. But if it's like you're constantly doing that, maybe that's not like building the skill that you need to before you become a lawyer. That
Sure.
makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this is going to be a really big of a stretch, okay? This is more of a question that perhaps you should be asking me. But I'm going to ask you this question because we hinted at it. What's your prediction as to how technology, especially some of this new technology, is going to affect the legal profession going forward?
Yeah, I mean, like for sure, that's more of your question, but like I think it's going to be something that's gonna really help the legal profession. Like it's a very like wordy profession in general, it seems like. Like I don't have experience in the field that much, but when it comes to like, for example, like getting the main point of cases, or like helping like, construct like your arguments and stuff, there's probably gonna be like different tools for different legal fields. Like for example, one of my colleagues told me about what is it, legal blue jay, and like how like that helps like with employment and labor law, and like that could like be something that's very helpful in that sense, because you don't have to constantly like hire someone to do that, like you can just put it through a software and it helps you.
Yeah, for sure. We actually subscribe to that software, Blue Jay Legal. Uh,
Yeah.
that's been helpful in many ways, including training some of our staff. So
Okay.
it's a helpful software.
Maybe you should give your input on the question.
My sense is that it's actually going to be tougher for young people trying to enter the legal profession. This is unfortunately, because a lot of the work that younger legal professionals are doing now, as they're entering the profession, that's being replaced. The senior lawyers are fine because they're the ones giving direction and they're the ones with the experience. But a lot of the administrative work that interns or law students have to do, a lot of the research that law students and articling students used to do, that could now be very easily
Yeah,
replaced
for sure.
with AI. A lot of the typing of letters and emails that was previously the obligation or the task of entry level workers and law students, interns, that can now be replaced by ChatGPT or the next iteration of ChatGPT,
Yeah,
because this is just the beginning, as you know.
that's so scary though, if you think
The
about it.
technology is only going to improve with potentially voice commands and even greater ability to synthesize and write and even perhaps even be creative. So we don't know where the technology is going to go, but I would imagine the people getting hit the most in terms of their employment opportunities are people trying to make it into the legal profession,
Yeah.
as opposed to people already in the legal profession, who've been established. They have their own law firms or their partners, and they're there for 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. I think those people are generally going to be safe. Maybe not all of them, but I think
Yeah.
most of them are still going to be kicking around for at least the next decade. But it's going to have a significant impact on younger people, which is unfortunate. But I foresee that happening, and not just in the legal profession, but in other professions where younger people are trying to break into the industry, and they're getting replaced by AI.
I think one thing that I want to say is that you have law schools like TMU, which has like recently opened up. Like it's not that old of a law school, and a lot of like their like law school specializes on entrepreneurship, technology, and like I guess it also I guess like obviously like that's kind of unfortunate for law students, but I think if like law schools make it more about that like technology and AI, maybe it could benefit employers in the future as well.
Yeah, I'd say so. One analogy uh, I like to make is a calculator, right? Back in the day, before the calculator was widespread, students had to do division, multiplication, and addition by hand, right? You had to actually write out the formula by hand, and that's how you completed your operation. But then when calculators were introduced, some math teachers thought this was not good for students, that they were not actually thinking, they were not actually doing the calculations, and they could just enter in the numbers. So there was some pushback, at least by some educators, with respect to calculators. But now calculators are ubiquitous. I don't imagine very few schools banning calculators. So it's more about, so in essence, putting in your operation command in a calculator is similar to an AI prompt, but this was obviously
Sure, yeah.
decades ago. That's in a way like they're back in the day, the version of an AI prompt. And I would anticipate that as we enter into this new world, people will just have to get better and more skilled at knowing what to do and how to enter prompts rather
Or
than doing the actual calculation or the operation themselves, which has all types of interesting implications, good and bad.
yeah.
So as we conclude this conversation today, any last pieces of advice for either law students or undergrads thinking of entering law school?
I think I think one advice is of course to always start early if that's what you're considering, but like if you put your mindsets to something, you can always accomplish it. Like a lot of people told me that I would not get into law school and like maybe like to explore like easier options such as like going to the UK. But I think if you give yourself a shot, then life will take you places. Like for example, I feel like the application process for law schools is in Canada is way easier than medical schools. I feel like you can't really do a comparison there because there's tools online to help you, for example, for the LSAT. And even if you have to, I have friends that I did LSAT prep courses with 3 4 years ago that are still like going through the process and still studying the LSAT. As long as like you're doing it right and you want to take your time with it, that's also fine. There's no rush. Like there's a lot of people that you'll meet even in law school that are in the same shoes. There's like mature students everywhere, and like it's like what makes the law such a unique field is like you get to meet so many different people and walk and you meet people through different walks of life and you get to learn from these different people as well. So
Absolutely. Sandy, thank you for your time today.
thank you.
Thank you for joining me, and we will speak to you again next time.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.